You're listening to the Real Life Podcast. We're an interactive show which tackles everything life sciences from conservation biology to zoology and botany.
Our podcast is where environmental awareness meets fun and chatter.
So come and listen to us as real life scientists tackle real life topics. Our guest today has her Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Physics and Zoology and her PhD in Climate Physics from the University of the West Indies.
She's a part of the Climate Studies Group as well as the Jamaica Iguana Recovery Group.
She is passionate about conservation, climate change, and sustainability.
And she's also one of our lecturers in the Department of Life Sciences. We want to say welcome to Dr. Kimberly Stephenson.
Good morning, Dr. Stephenson.
Good morning. Hi.
Dr. Stephenson. It's so nice to see you outside of class. Well, not really, but not see you, but
here.
It's a rare event that anybody sees me outside of UE these days. So the interaction is nice.
So to begin our podcast today, this is our second recording. So we just want to get into just a little warm up. You know, we don't have to jump into it so quickly. So we want to ask you, if you could be one animal for a day, which animal would it be?
If I could be one animal for a day, I think most of you probably know what realm of animals I'm going to choose from. So I think I would probably be a twig anole, just chilling on a branch all day,
looking
at whatever bugs pass my way. It would be lovely. Basking.
One, maybe one of the ones that run on the floor, on the ground.
No, man, I think a twig is perfect for me. Twig anole is definitely it. Yeah,
and
yeah. Just basking, just holding on for dear life.
But that not being able to regulate your body temperature, though, I don't think that would be ideal for me because I'm always cold. So I need to be able to warm up.
That's true. But I mean, I think a twig anole is a weird choice, but it's an expected choice from your students.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for the ethereal feeling of depending on the universe to warm you, you know?
Oh, well.
You're very connected to the earth.
That's very philosophical.
You know, we all need to get in touch with our earthly side.
Facts.
Exactly.
Okay. So we know that you're a scientist now, but if you weren't a scientist right now, what career path would you have gone down?
I have to say I would have been an artist, which is probably, I don't know if it's the polar opposite or if it goes hand in hand, but I've always been interested in writing, drawing, painting, and I've actually sold a few paintings in my life, and I'm very proud of that. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So yeah, I think I do actually want to move in that direction of just being a wild and free painter.
Wow. That's things so you would never know inside the classroom.
Yeah, that's definitely. It's so fun. It's fun to have lecturers outside of the whole class setting and just teaching us, but you know, getting to know them. It's very interesting learning about your lives.
Thank you. I think a lot of students especially don't realize that we have lives. I think they have this impression of us that we're always
it's difficult to kind of think about it outside of the classroom because I guess you guys are people too, right?
I guess. I mean, maybe. You never know.
Just maybe they have lives outside of the classroom. Okay, but what's the weirdest thing, being a scientist and always in the field, of course, what's the weirdest thing that you've seen while out in the field?
The weirdest thing I've seen. Well, to be fair, when I was first going into the field, everything was weird. So a little bit of background. I did not grow up an outdoorsy person at all. Okay. If I went outside, I would end up falling, bruising everything, I didn't like dirt. It was just
Wow.
yeah, I was
This
not
is hard
very,
for
I
me.
loved nature, but I liked reading about it.
Mm,
Yeah,
I
and
see.
watching it on TV. So when I finished undergrad and I had the chance to start grad school, I decided I wanted to stay in academia. And I had been really interested in a lot of the field work that we had done in undergrad. And I thought, well, I don't feel like staying in a lab all day for the rest of my life. So why not go outside and, climb things? Um, so I started out in the Helsha Hills, which is a dry limestone forest. And for somebody who is clumsy and not very outdoorsy and has arthritis and all of these little things,
Wow.
the whole experience was just wild. So I can't say there's any one specific weird thing, but I will say that
So no two-headed lizards.
I didn't find any two-headed lizards. I found one or two two-tailed lizards. So there was
Oh
that.
wow.
There were just, it was, like I said, it was just a whole new world. So just traversing like some of the rock formations that I've seen in these limestone forests, that you're walking along in this one little patch of dirt you found, and then suddenly boom, cliff face, and suddenly you're a climber and you have to be using your hands to get up the hill. I've seen, I think one of the weird things I've seen is, and we've probably talked about this in class before, but I think one of the weirdest things I saw in that first field season was a yellow boa just in the middle of the pathway that
In the
had,
wild?
it was in the wild, yeah. We do find them occurring in Helsha, and I found it just sitting there on the path, and I thought, well, this is weird. I wonder what happened. Only to come across him and realize that a mongoose had bitten out its throat and just left the carcass
Oh
there.
wow.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the first time I knew that the
Oh,
mongoose was just such a brazen creature. I knew that they ate
it's
for fun.
crazy.
I knew that they played with their food. I knew all of that, but I didn't know that they would, attack a whole boa.
Kill a
So
whole boa.
Wow.
a whole boa, yeah. So that was.
Wow.
Hmm?
You think a boa would just swallow up a mongoose?
Yeah. You
You'd
think
think
it would
so.
just
You'd
like
think
wrap
so, but
around it or something?
yeah. Well, if this one wasn't a full-grown boa, but it was of a reasonable size, and I suppose the mongoose probably, I don't know if it did the damage before the boa could realize enough to constrict. I don't know, but the mongoose did a number on that one.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was one of the things, one of the weird things I noticed. Another weird thing that happened to me in my first field season. I had these little traps out, and they all had a little bit of alcohol in them. They were really small. I just wanted to catch a few things and preserve them. And there were these jonquils in the Helsha Hills, and they found everywhere I had installed a trap and just decided to defecate into every single one of
Oh
my
my
traps.
god.
They would make a nice little nest. They would make a nice little nest right above my trap, and that would be the only place they would stay. And every single
Oh
time,
wow.
every single day, I had to fix my traps because the jonquils just had it out for me.
Oh
Oh wow.
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 Giving new meaning to what it
Yeah,
means to
junk
be a
bro.
jungle.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
That's
So
so
yeah, there
funny.
were also some weird things.
Wow. Okay, I did not expect
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Things to look out for in the field. I
exactly.
can't
How
wait.
many times you have
Yeah,
in the wild?
same. Yeah, I can relate to that too because when I decided I wanted to do a degree, first of all, I wanted to be a vet. And then when I decided I wanted to do an animal bio degree, my mom was like, "You afraid of lizard?" And the other day I was running away from spiders that have taken over my yard. And she's like, "There's no way you're going to be able to work with animals if you're afraid of a little lizard and you're afraid of spider, those things." And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna prove you wrong. And here I am, still afraid of them. But you know what? I think I'm still
That's
gonna
not
go
where
out
I
in the
thought this
field
was
anyway.
going.
I didn't
No,
think I was
seriously,
going there either.
I'm still gonna go out in the field anyways.
But
I
I
still
think,
want to try the new experience, you know?
yeah. And even as zoologists, I think we deserve to be able to have a healthy respect for animals, but we don't have to love all of them. I think there's this misconception that as a biologist, you have to love everything in nature. And I don't think you absolutely have to force yourself to interact with everything. I think it's good to have a healthy appreciation for them, but some things you just don't have to go near. Like centipedes,
weird.
I will not go near a centipede. It's just not going to happen.
I have no fear of the small things, which is really weird. Like I grew up having to take care of the lizards and the roaches in the house because my mother is deathly afraid of them. But I cannot go around chickens. Live chickens,
That's so
I
strange.
I will lose my
That's
mind.
really strange.
Chickens.
Everything I'm cool with everything else, but live chickens are my kryptonite. I cannot. I will not. I refuse to. I will eat them fried, but not alive. I cannot.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I'm the opposite because if it's like a mammal, because that's why I want to be a mammologist, right? Because the little things, those scare me. Because I'm like, I don't know where you've been. You can fit anywhere. You're so tiny. I would just be walking, and then all of a sudden there you are. But like like a cow, I can't miss a cow. A cow is gonna be there. Horse is gonna be there, but I will definitely miss like a little ant, or I'll miss something else that could possibly crawl on me. And as I say that, my dog came into my room.
That
And you
that's
didn't miss it.
okay. Hi Benson. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get down into the real reason why we're here today.
Okay.
So, what was your experience like doing a double major at the University of the West Indies? That's in physics and zoology, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, I did a double major in environmental physics and zoology. When I was
Mm.
doing my double major, it was in, let me see, what year was this? This was a long time ago. I think I started in '05. Yeah, yeah, right. So when I was doing this, there wasn't as much of a facility for like shifting timetables and making sure that departments were sort of streamlined with each other and all of those things. I mean,
Mm.
it's still kind of a clash right now, but I think there's um, it's more understood now that students are going to be interdisciplinary. At the time, I think there were probably 4 of us in the entire faculty who were doing those 2 subjects. So there was no coordination between those 2 aspects of my timetable at all. So while the material I was studying was fantastic, and I enjoyed most of it, it was a struggle, I have to say. I very often had to choose whether I would go to a biolab today or whether I would go to my physics lectures. And sometimes I remember studying ecology and Prof. Webber was lecturing it at the time. And I remember every ecology lab that happened on a particular day, I had to sit in for the first hour, run out for an hour to go to a physics lecture, and then run back for the last hour. And to be fair, my grades were not great. But I wanted
You're making
to,
it work though.
whenever I had those subjects that I had to skip from one to the other, I had to pick one to be better in. Like there's only so much you can do. So there would always be a situation where I would pass everything, but my grade for one would always be better than my grade for the other. And I understood it was a trade-off, but I really wanted to do those 2 subject areas, and I was really enjoying them. So I just decided, you know what, I will cut down my shame tree. When I'm struggling, I will go to my lecturers, I will get as much help as I need, and I will just power through. In my first year, in my first semester especially, I didn't fully understand what that powering through would mean. And I will say there was 1 subject I failed. And once I realized that I couldn't go for my entire university career failing things, I just kind of pulled myself up by the bootstraps, as they say, and just realized that I needed to figure out a way, my own way, to work out doing both those subjects, you know? And I didn't love physics at the beginning. It was just not math. So that's why I kind of went along with it. That was the entire reason I picked up physics in the first place. But I think one of the things I enjoyed about physics, and both physics and life sciences, is that they're very story based. So with life sciences, of course, we're crafting these stories about nature and what happens in the world, and it's kind of like creative writing on one end, and it's like kind of like history on the other end, where you're discovering how nature has developed and all that. And in physics, it's another end of story writing, where you're telling a story with math, so you're explaining the atmosphere, you're explaining the way the ocean moves, you're explaining the fundamental dynamics of nature with math. And I'm very, my mind is very story based as well, so I can't swat things. I don't do well when you just give me numbers and expect me to do things with the numbers without any context. So I think that's why I worked well with both physics and life sciences, just being able to craft stories with what I was learning. And eventually the clashing timetable just became my normal. And like I said, I tell students this all the time, just don't be afraid of your lecturers, even if they seem kind of scary. They really are there to help you. And what's the worst that can happen? Are they going to shame you in their office? Okay, fine. But tomorrow you're still going to be in your class anyway.
You won't be worse off.
Yeah, you won't be worse off. Exactly. You might be better off because they might help you, but you won't be worse off in any way. So just don't worry about the embarrassment. Just get the help you need. When I was, especially in final year, when I was doing parasitology and I was in
Dr. Robinson?
I didn't like Prof. Robinson's class, but I didn't like parasites. I'm just gonna say, well, it's like you were saying about the little.
Oh, but now I'm in love with them.
You're in love with them, of course you are, naturally.
No,
but it's like you were saying about the creepy crawlies earlier. The parasites, they're even more problematic than the creepy crawlies, I would say, because they're inside of your body and they're doing destructive things and you don't even realize. I don't know, but that kind of creeped me out a little bit in undergrad, and I was just kind of struggling. And I spent a lot of time just going to Prof. Robinson and saying, sir, I don't get this. I'm not sure what's going on. Please explain it to me. And he was very patient and he explained what I needed him to explain. And when I had another problem, I would go to another lecturer and I would just ask until I figured it out. And honestly, that was what brought me through undergrad. Just being able to chop down my shame tree and just know that I was going to find the help I needed because I couldn't do it all on my own. Right. So that's the long story.
So you did both of those. Your double major. Yeah. Was that because you wanted to do climatology, or that just kind of came along?
It came along. So both, I knew I was interested in some amount of the physics I was learning. I knew I was interested in nature. I too wanted to focus on mammals because I thought the fuzzy things are cuter, like most people. And as I went along, I'm glad you asked that question, actually. That was a pretty important turning point for me, especially in second year to third year. And I started off in prelim life sci. I started off in level 1 physics, but prelim life sci. So I actually did my degree in 4 years in order to finish up my zoology major. So somewhere around third year, I started to do more atmospheric physics. I started to study more with Prof. Taylor and Dr. Stephenson and from the climate studies group. And at some point on the climatology side, I was really enjoying atmospheric physics and I was getting great grades, of course. And I was doing some of Prof. Chen's courses as well. And one day, Prof. Taylor came to me after class and he said, "You know what? You're competent." And I thought that is the most amazing thing a lecturer has ever said to me. Thank you. That's amazing. So once I got that compliment, I started to my interest started to grow a little bit because, as I said, I really liked what I was studying. And the climate studies group at the time, they still do allow a lot of undergrads to help out with their data work or to help out with literature surveys and so on. So I got to help out a little bit in undergrad with that. And that basically solidified my ideas about what I wanted to do with climate physics. And on the other end, I was doing courses with Prof. Wilson in life sciences, and he was running the iguana program at the time. So he took us on field trips to the Helsha Hills, and it was a wild day. Like I said, I was not very outdoorsy at the time, but it was fantastic just being outside, just being in this wild environment that people aren't walking through all the time, and just seeing all of these animals and all these plants and all these species just living their best lives. Living
That's so
Amazing.
Yes,
actually
it
amazing.
was amazing, and it was eye-opening, and we had to get to that site, you have to basically take a boat from Port Royal all the way around the south coast till you get to Manatee Bay. And that too, I was terrified. I'm still terrified of large bodies of water. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, so being on that boat was a scary experience, but we got through it. We lived, saw some manta rays. It was beautiful. Um, and yeah, the whole experience was just very eye-opening for me. And at that point I realized, you know what? I love zoology, and I love climate physics. How can I put them together? And I started doing some research into how to
Oh,
incorporate both of them. I came up with an idea of what I wanted. I talked to Prof. Taylor, I talked to Prof. Wilson, and we figured out a direction for my graduate project. And that's kind of how undergrad was able to shape my life after that point.
fantastic.
Definitely. Okay, that was a very fruitful story. I love that. I love that you got to find your passion from so early, because some of us don't get to find it until, we reach
Hmm.
probably master's degree,
I am
or,
also.
until we leave UE. I'm sure some of the people listening don't even know what they want to do with their degree once they're done. But I have a question for you.
Oh no, I'm us.
I have a question
I'm
for you
us.
as it relates to climate change. So there are some persons
Yeah.
that believe that climate change is not real. And so as a person who studies this and who has studied this for a bit kind of a while now, is climate change real, and what evidence do we have to show that?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And I'm going to keep saying this because you do have excellent questions. But climate change is by all means real. I think there's a lot of the climate deniers have tried to say that, well, I think the first thing that they try to depend on is that climate change always happens, and so it's not, even if there is a slight change right now, it's not humans' fault. And to be fair, yes, the climate has been changing. It has changed throughout the entirety of Earth's history. What we're seeing right now is the data is indisputable. Um, if you look at data over just a 30-year period, which is usually what we use to calculate a climatology, you can see where there is a trend of an increase in temperatures across the world, and you're seeing certainly a change in rainfall in different parts of the world as well. Depending on where you go, that might mean we're getting drier. In some parts, they're getting wetter. So, for example, in the tropical areas, we unfortunately are getting a lot drier. We're closer to the equator and so on. So, and we're seeing changes in our hurricanes as well. We're seeing right, they're
Much
getting
more
stronger.
stronger.
They're getting they're lingering a little bit longer. They're getting more. They're becoming more frequent. Um, I mean, how often do you see a hurricane season where we end up having to use the Greek alphabet because we've run out of yeah, because we've run
Right.
out of letters and names. So
I think this was probably the second one, and we went
yeah,
further
we went
into it
further
this
into it
time.
this time. And even if we just think about hurricanes Irma, Maria, from a couple of years ago, you can see the differences. And yes, there are other cycles, other cycles across the earth that will contribute to intensification every couple of decades and so on. But the kinds of changes we're seeing now, we
Yeah.
haven't seen before. So we are seeing, mhm,
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask because I think I remember
yeah.
doing a seminar with you, or was it just some presentation for maybe BSA, and you had mentioned that there are like cycles that the Earth goes through where sometimes it gets stronger and then it dies out. But that's why I think a lot of people, I was having this conversation and they were trying to tell me that, yeah, it's a cycle, that I couldn't say anything because I heard you say it. So just like run it back for us. Like, there are cycles, but this is actually
Right,
climate
yes.
change,
So
right?
it's exactly as you've said. There are cycles. There are things like there are cycles in the temperature of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. There are cycles in sea surface pressure. There are cycles in atmospheric pressure. There's just, because really our climate is this movement of water and air particles, this interaction between the atmosphere and the ocean. That's really what drives our climate, right? And yes, there are cycles in these, there are phases and there are cycles. So in the Atlantic, we have a cycle of sea surface temperatures, for example, where it used to be called the Atlantic multidecadal oscillation. It's not called an oscillation anymore, but I don't remember the term for that. But most of us still use that term. So with the AMO, basically every couple of decades, the Atlantic gets a little bit warmer, and every couple of decades it cools down. So when it gets warmer, we say we're in a positive cycle, and we get stronger hurricanes. We get more hurricanes. However, what we're seeing now with hurricanes is more intense and more frequent than what we would normally see during a positive cycle of the AMO. Or with the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And El Nino is basically the extra warming of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And when that happens, the Caribbean tends to get a lot drier and we get more droughts. Basically, one way to remember it is that if the Pacific is warmer than the Atlantic, then the Caribbean is dry. If the Atlantic is warmer than the Pacific, the Caribbean gets rain. So what we've been noticing too is that we're getting more El Nino events, so more of these intensified warming events in the equatorial Pacific, and that means that the Caribbean is getting drier and it's getting more frequent El Nino associated droughts. And you can see that. So yes, it's a cycle that we can measure and that we've seen in the past, but the cycle is getting more intense, and there's no denying that. So having seen all of that, then one of the, as I was mentioning, one of the things that climate deniers like to say is that, well, people aren't really the cause of this. It's really only because the Earth's climate changes every how often, and we've had ice ages before and all that good stuff. And yes, we have had ice ages before and all these events. And yes, solar flares and changes in the Earth's orbit and changes in the tilt of its axis, all of that happens every few 100,000 years. Yeah, we know about all of that, but all of that is very slow. What we've been seeing when we're talking about climate change now, what we're really saying is we have seen a very distinct spike in changes in our climate patterns since we started with industry. So you can see distinctly where carbon dioxide, water vapor, methane, and other greenhouse gases have exponentially increased in the atmosphere since we started building factories and we started driving more cars. Yeah, so
right. And
right, exactly. The Earth didn't make our diesel cars. You know, the Earth didn't tell us to burn all the dead dinosaurs. The Earth didn't tell us to do that. We did it. And we know the effect that greenhouse gases have on our climate. We know that greenhouse gases are necessary. The greenhouse effect is necessary to keep us warm. But we also know that if the greenhouse gases get too thick in the atmosphere, get too concentrated, then that warming will become too intense for us. And that's what we've been doing. We've just been pumping a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and you can measure when that started. A lot of these changes that we're seeing now, they started when the industrial era began. Yeah, exactly.
The industrial revolution.
And that's not to say that we shouldn't manufacture things. That's not to say that we shouldn't have factories and we shouldn't have progress, because I think that's another misconception that people have, that that when we say the climate is changing and we should use fossil fuels, it also means we're against capitalism, but that's not really the case. We're just saying that there are better ways. There must be better ways to achieve this kind of industrial revolution without also destroying the planet that we're on. There have to be different ways. There have to be.
All right. So all this interest in climate and all of that, but we also know that you are, as you said earlier, a big fan of the creepy crawlies, the herps, the frogs, the lizards, the snakes, all
Indeed.
that slimy stuff.
Why
Why?
herbs?
Why herps? Of all,
Of everything.
of all the
Well,
beautiful things in the world.
why herbs? Well,
Why
you're going
herps?
to get another long story, but
Yeah, go right ahead.
okay,
Not
sure,
to
I
Go
could
go
talk all
ahead. Go
day.
ahead. Go ahead.
Um, so when I was in undergrad, so Prof Wilson, who taught me in undergrad and was one of my supervisors, one of my PhD supervisors, along with Prof Taylor. Prof Wilson is a herpetologist. He mainly focuses on, his main interest is like crocodiles and iguanas. But he's as you said, a big fan of reptiles and amphibians. And because I was studying under him and I was getting a lot of a lot of my field experience through him, I think that's where my interest first started. So I didn't actually, while I knew I liked mammals and I liked birds, by the end of undergrad, I wasn't really sure of which animal group I really wanted to focus on. I just knew I wanted to focus on an animal group. And when I was growing up, my mother wasn't really scared of lizards, but my father was not happy with them. Just, he was not a fan. So there was nothing in my upbringing to lead me towards them. Yeah, but Prof Wilson was very passionate about
Right.
them, and he allowed me to help out with a lot of his research. So I helped with catching crocodiles. I helped with preserving the Jamaican iguana, and my graduate project was actually focusing on trapping and assessing population sizes of some amount of arthropods, so beetles and well, scorpions and little things, but also a few groups of our endemic
Yeah.
lizards, so anoles, skinks, gallywasps. Right. So I got a lot of my experience through that, and I just learned to love them immediately. They were beautiful. They just this they're so fragile, and yet they're so strong. So you can't find a faster sprinter than a lizard, but he burns out quickly. He just runs out of energy.
Delicate balance.
And it's just they're just fascinating creatures to me. And I think the first time I was able to hold a lizard and I felt his little heartbeat, and I felt him breathing, and yes, he was terrified of me, but I was enjoying him being in my hands, and it was just a beautiful experience. And one of
You
Yeah,
connected
that's
them
what
because you're
that's
both small
exactly what I
people
thought.
enjoying big worms.
They're small, he's small. It all makes sense.
well, when you put it that way, I do relate. I do relate. Yeah, I suppose that did kind of have something to do with it. I kind of like rooting for underdogs, and I knew that a lot of people just didn't like them, and I wanted to know if there was any justification for that. And of course, there isn't any. I think a lot of people are just scared of what they don't understand. But I do remember one of the turning points for me was when, I mean, I've been bitten and peed on and pooed on by all these lizards before, but there was one day when one lizard, an Anolis grammae, actually fell into one of my alcohol traps, and she nearly died, and I caught her right before she died, and I had to hold her and nurse her back to health.
Aw.
And I bonded with her, and ever since
Aw.
then it's just been a love story. What can I say? It's just been lovely. Yeah. But it was during that
Wow.
early period of working with
Hmm.
Prof Wilson that I really got to like herps.
I don't think I will ever be able to relate, but
Maybe not with
that's
herps,
great.
but one day you will find your thing, and it will just be like doors opening for you.
Maybe insects. I think I'm having a thing
Everybody
for
has their
Yes,
thing.
mosquitoes.
everybody has their area that they want to go into. So you mentioned that, well, most of your stories have centered around your work at UWI, and in
Mm-hmm.
Jamaica, because for those who are not in Jamaica listening, University of the West Indies Mona campus in Jamaica. So why did you choose specifically to stay in Jamaica and not do your master's or go overseas to continue your studies?
I think for me personally, when I finished undergrad, I was kind of uncertain about what direction I really wanted to take. And I had already been in talks with Prof. Taylor and Prof. Wilson about possible projects. Prof. Taylor actually recruited me a little bit for climate studies because he realized I was interested, and I guess I kind of had a knack for it. So because I had more certainty with what was already at the university at UWI. I think I chose the certainty. Honestly, I think
Mhm.
that was my thinking. If I'd gone somewhere else, I wasn't sure where I would have gone. I wasn't sure even where to start looking because I wasn't really sure what I was interested in. So I stuck around because I knew what direction my graduate studies would take if I stayed. Um, right. So that was my choice, which is one of the reasons I do try to encourage some students to figure out what they're into before undergrad ends, because when you finish undergrad, you're just kind of left there. You're just unless you've already explored something, you're just kind of left there not really knowing what to do or where to go. And that can eat up a lot of your time. So it's fine if you want to go out and work. It's fine if you want to pursue a master's or a PhD. Either way is fine, but just don't uh try to figure out what you like early on so that you
Yeah.
don't spend too much
Don't
time in the figuring out phase. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think this one's for me. I mean, I want to do vet
Yep.
school, but then vet school isn't
Yeah.
in Jamaica,
Yeah,
and it's such a
it
big
is a big
world
world,
out
but it's
there.
such an interesting world.
It is.
And I think if you do get the opportunity to go abroad, it is a great opportunity. You get experience elsewhere. You get experience with different cultures and so on. I think on my end, I get a lot of that sort of international experience from research. So we go to a lot of conferences, we go to a lot of meetings. You get to experience a lot of these different research settings because it's sort of like one big community. So I do still get that kind of experience with different cultures through my research and through those experiences. But I do think if you have the opportunity to go somewhere else for a while, I think it's a great thing to do. And if you want to stay, just make the most of it. Make the most of either choice.
So, I mean, I think with that though, one thing that I'm starting to notice, because I decided that I wanted to start looking about jobs and stuff from now. But then when I was looking for
Mhm.
jobs, I was like, wait, I don't even know what to type in. I don't know what position I can get with my degree. Yeah, that's how this was
Yep, that
Okay.
mostly.
that's kind of how
So
this
it would,
podcast
I
was
Mhm.
think for the
born.
persons
We're
listening,
like,
those
what are we
interested
gonna
in
do?
zoology, because some people ask from as early as high school, most people just assume once you get an animal bio degree, oh, you're becoming a vet or you're becoming a vet technician. Um, so
Mhm.
when we're looking for jobs, what do we look for? And then there are different routes, right? So some people choose going into academia, some people choose going into research. But apart from academic, going into, becoming a teacher or a lecturer or going into doing research, what can you do or where can you go forward after you do your bachelor's degree?
Well, there are so I don't know all of the opportunities, but I would say that you can work in a wide range of areas. So you can work in a zoo, you can work in a museum, managing museum collections. You can, of course, stay in research, and of course, you can still teach. But there are other opportunities. So what I would advise is just search for what can I do to work with animals, or how to work with animals, or jobs in zoologies. Just start with the most general search you can possibly find, um, and just start picking things off one by one. Just explore absolutely everything that comes up. So there are things that you can do, and you don't absolutely have to. The other thing is with a zoology degree, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stay studying animals for your entire life or stay working with just animals for your entire life. One of the things that's great about having a science degree in the first place is that you're very adaptable. And there will be other fields that you can sort of dip your toes into if you're interested in them.
Okay.
So yeah, so I would say just do a general search of everything that's out there with working with animals, and just start there. Just start with whatever you find there. And in the meantime, I would say just start volunteering a lot, volunteering in conservation projects. For example, the Jamaica Conservation and Development Trust has a lot of different conservation projects going on. NEPA, UDC. If we're talking about Jamaica,
Yeah.
yeah, they do have conservation projects. You can plant trees with them. You can, there are other projects where you can help release sea turtles and so on. So just dip your feet into everything. Yeah, in Arakabesa, there are some projects going on where you can help with, they do rescue sea turtles, and you can help to release baby sea
Oh,
turtles.
and they always post the release dates on Instagram too. I always wanted to go to one of them, and you can actually sign up. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Stephenson. So, as citizens, well, as females, I know like the general thing is that, oh, we're always afraid of lizards and whatever. I mean, I am not that person, and I'm sure you're not working with herps. I don't know about Maya, but what can we do like to raise awareness in general that herbs are a part of life and we just have to live with them too? Like we know that like climate change is having an impact on them, and it's already shortening their life, but then we're killing them. So like, what encouragement do you have for people like
Okay,
to get them to
well,
stop doing that?
first of all, as you said, climate change is having an impact on them. We've talked about how they depend on the climate to regulate their body temperature, and a lot of people think that, oh well, especially a lot of lizards live in warmer temperatures. They think, okay, well, if global warming isn't going to affect them because they already like warm temperatures, but that's not the case. Herps have a very specific optimal temperature range or optimal moisture range or optimal humidity range. Right, exactly. And how they live their lives, how they get warm also tells you a lot about how they'll respond to climate changes as well. So do they bask? Do they get their warmth in the shade? Do they sit on the treetop to warm? So yeah, global warming or climate change, really. We try not to use the term global warming too much, but right, but climate change is going to have an impact on them, and it is already reducing a lot of their population sizes. It's a few of them are at risk, or not a few, many of them are at risk of extinction already, but they're very important to the ecosystems that they occupy. So they very often regulate the populations of insects and other arthropods. So if we lose herps, we increase a lot of arthropods.
Well, you know that
Exactly.
I love that you said that, because just this morning we have a bunch of spiders populating right all over. So I live in Kingston, but I live in the hills, right? So there's a bunch of spiders. Like I opened my window and I looked up in the tree and I saw the mama spider, and I really felt like I was in a movie. So my mom was like, so there are so many spiders around the place, we need to just spray them more and kill them more. And in my head I'm like, you kill every lizard you see. If you would just leave the lizards alone and let them, reproduce, then those lizards would take care of our spider problem, and we wouldn't have to be going outside with mop sticks and brooms and trying to decobweb the place all the time.
Yes, exactly. Just make the lizards happy and they will take care of you. Yeah, so they do regulate a lot of populations, and they're also necessary to encourage forest growth as well and forest germination. So many of them eat, for example, the Jamaican iguana eats fruits, and many iguanas are the same. They eat fruits. They're able to distribute these fruits, and just by means of these seeds passing through their gut systems, it makes the seeds germinate faster. It makes the seeds germinate more. It makes the seeds more likely to germinate in many. And because they're depositing organic matter while they're depositing the seed, it allows that seed to live a longer life and so on. And this is not for every single seed, but for many of them. And so these herps are very often they're forest growers basically. So without our herps, we also would have less flourishing forests. So they do play key roles in population, in the ecosystems that they occupy. We need the forest, exactly.
We need the forest.
We do, and that would help with our
we do
climate
need to
change
kill back
problem
those
too. It
trees.
would just help
So
all the way around. So I think one of the ways that I always say we could help with the appreciation of herps is to just get especially young school children to interact with them. So there have been programs, children can visit, and anyone can visit the zoo, and you can view the iguanas. There have been awareness programs led by NEPA and UDC and so on to carry things like crocodiles and iguanas to students and to expose and to schools and so on for them to get to interact with them. But the best way, I think, to get people to have an appreciation for them is not only to tell them how important they are, but also to just have them touch them. And that's one of the major reasons that when I think you both did herps with me, right? At some point?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, you did. Last semester,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
Last semester.
And you kind of had to do some of this on your own because of, current unprecedented circumstances. But under normal circumstances, we would have been out there, and part of the regulation for that experience would have been to at least touch one. And I find that a lot of I do remember I mentioned that you should have sent in a picture with you touching one. I think you did.
No, for me, I was like, I'm just gonna lose the grade on this one. I'm just gonna lose the marks.
Yeah, we had to.
I really wasn't gonna.
A few people did.
I touched a whole cane toad, and you punked out. That's not fair.
Sorry.
Okay, fair point. I appreciate those who did, and I understand those who didn't. But if we were in person, we could have caught some. I would have carried them around to the whole class. Everybody would have had a chance to touch them. And I find that a lot of students who are, well, the terrified ones, I can't really change your minds very easily. But I find that a lot of students who are on the fence, who aren't really sure if they like them or not, who think they're creepy crawly but aren't sure if they can touch them. Once they do touch them, and like I said, they feel their breath and they feel their little heartbeats and they see how cute they are, and they start to warm up to them. They're cute. If you just look at them like you've never seen one before.
I mean, fear is learned. Fear is learned, so I understand, because if you introduce children to it like very early, they won't fear it when they get older. It's the fact that we're taught, for even my mother, if I followed my mother because she was always scared of them, then I would have a death fear of lizards. But
and that's a great thing. I've caught lizards before for my little cousins. And my little cousins will be touching the lizard. They'll be happy to see it, and their mothers will be running down the street screaming because they don't want to be near the lizard. And I always think that's it does kind of show up that learned behavior, that the older you are, the less likely your mind is to be changed towards herps, especially. But I do think interaction is the best way to learn appreciation.
Definitely. Well, we've come to the end of our episode. Thank you so much for being here with us for almost an hour talking about climate change and herps and your experience in undergraduate and all of that. So I think we'll probably end with asking, how can students, well, if anybody reaching this would like to contact you, how can they contact you?
Well, you can send me an email. That would be the easiest route. My email address is, I should probably spell out my name. Okay. My email address is kimberly.stephenson02@uemona.edu.jm. That's KIMBERLY.STEPHENSON02@uemona.edu.jm.
And for people that want to volunteer in conservation, could you
so if you want to volunteer if you're a student at UE and you want to volunteer in the iguana program, you can email me directly. and just let me know that you're interested. Let me know what experience you've had with herps before, or why you're interested in volunteering. You can also look out for the Jamaica Conservation and Development Trust. You can check them out as well. They have various conservation programs going on. For example, students can help to plant trees in the Blue Mountains. They do have a reforestation program, a nursery program going there. And in addition to that, I would say just look out for the National Environmental Planning Agency and the Urban Development Corporation. They tend to have a lot of these volunteer beach cleanups, tree planting days, and those kinds of activities. And I think that's an excellent way if you're kind of thinking of conservation to get involved in those activities as well. And look around your community. A lot of communities have these projects going on as well. A lot of small communities have not only conservation projects, but also climate projects going on. A lot of our climate projects have been working directly with communities, not only for awareness, but to do things like install weather stations and so on. So, right. So just look out for those calls. And you can also volunteer at the Hope Zoo as well. So you can reach out to them.
Love that.
Okay. Yeah, very good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea. So, guys, there are so many opportunities for people that are interested in this field. Get out there, get on it. If you want to get into this field, as Dr. Stephenson advised, just make sure you know what you want to do before.
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
finished
And our case where, you want to get experience during undergrad, because a lot of times people want to have some kind of, experience during their undergrad time and think that there's only opportunities available for people who have a degree. We just listed a couple of, volunteer things. We're not getting paid to do it, but at least you'll get that field experience. Oh, that's all we had to say.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
This
So
was
this has been
fun.
great. Thank you for joining us, Dr.
It
Stephenson.
definitely was.
And we hope you continue to have a good day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Real Life Podcast. Follow us on our social media pages, Real Life Pod 876 on Twitter and the Real Life Podcast 876 on Instagram and Facebook. Remember, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Tune in next week, where real life scientists tackle real life issues.